All right, so live again, and I just want to briefly talk about basically what the title implies, which is red pill and extreme feminist emotional manipulation and mating strategies, and how this relates with the dating apps, therapy, self help, inner work, and social media doom loop spiral, which these dynamics all taken together, I believe, and I've seen more times than I can count, to be really influencing and guiding factors for why a lot of people are really struggling with dating and relationships and really just feeling overwhelmed, feeling confused, feeling a lot more stress and anxiety than perhaps they really even need to be feeling. So, one thing that I've been saying for years, I think maybe since 2016, 2017, somewhere thereabouts, what I've been saying is that more often than not, a lot of what you see in terms of gender politics and identity politics is large in part an emotional manipulation strategy for the individual because it's often used and adopted by people who feel a sense of disempowerment and they feel a sense of loss of control. They feel some loss of meaning and purpose. So, to surrogate and supplement and try to fill in that hole within themselves, they turn to the stimulation and the validation afforded from identity and gender sort of politics. And that combined with all the kind of therapy doublespeak and lingo that tends to come along with that, what that does more often than not is empowers a person with a wide degree of emotional manipulation and psychological coercion strategies, which this is not anything new. It's not anything particularly unique. If we just take 5 minutes and look at history, if we look at many different cultures throughout time, how they initiated change, how they used propaganda, how they manipulated people in mass, they used these kinds of strategies, some sort of gender politics, identity politics, or economic uh, permutations of those ideas. Which, if we don't know this, we don't realize this. Basically, gender and identity politics is a derivative and offshoot and product of Marxism, which is ultimately a whole other thing, which we won't get into. You can look at that on your own. But this is a clear and easily verified historical chain of events and connection points that anyone can easily find out on their own. So my point is that more often than not, people use these things as a way to coerce and manipulate other people. So basically, if you combine gender identity politics with some therapy, double speak, and then if you take it to the next level and add in some pseudo spirituality languaging, then you're really empowered as an individual to coerce and manipulate almost every person or situation that you come up against. The person that you'll do that to the most is yourself, which that's usually why people are so frustrated and disempowered and confused and have such low energy levels and such poor health is because of what they're doing to themselves first and foremost, because of all of the hypnosis and bamboozlement that they are subscribing to and engaging within through subscribing to all of these different ideologies, which don't really tend to produce very good results throughout time. And also, the trick is listening to your heart chakra and not your second chakra. Yeah, I don't really think that's the trick because emotions and feelings are usually rooted in the past, which is past experience, which is not now, and it's usually often fear. Usually, you don't want something to happen, or you do want something to happen. So that's some degree of conflict because you're taking the past and your memories and the emotions attached to that, projecting it into the here and now, and more or less. Sometimes that can be very accurate, of course. Listening to your gut, listening to your intuition, listening to just that or your conscience, of course, those can be useful things. but that has nothing to do with your heart chakra or in any way, shape, or form. And actually, it's a good thing to mention because this is going to be a good segue to what I'm saying about how this relates to men and their overall dating and coping strategy. And I'll say this from the jump, then this might be offensive or triggering for a lot of people. And this will explain why I maybe for so many years have been a bit critical of quote unquote pop spirituality is because the vast majority of what is out there available in the world is filtered through women and adapted to women. So it's basically takes men and tries to make them more feminine is more or less what ends up happening. And if that's not the case, and if what I'm saying is not true, then why is there this huge movement of all of these men trying to become more masculine? You know, getting on TRT and lifting weights and being carnivore and trying to do all these things. If they're going to this extreme now, what could have possibly led to having to go to this extreme to compensate? What are they compensating for? What are they adapting to? They're adapting to getting into all this spirituality, new age stuff, which a lot of it was just emotional manipulation and psychological coercion from women. And men were doing it and buying into it because ultimately they're guided by their base desires, which means ultimately they're just doing it because they're hoping it will get them laid. In the simplest absolute terms, they're subscribing and buying into all of these things and hypnotizing themselves and bamboozling themselves and coercing themselves emotionally and doing all of these things ultimately so they can court a woman or adapt to some woman's preconceived ideas or get laid. Ultimately is what it comes down to, which funny enough ends up having the opposite effect because it makes the men more feminine. It makes them it undermines their health, it undermines their fabric. It it trains them to function in a way that's not really appropriate for them. So it creates more conflict, it creates more disease, it creates more discord and confusion, and makes them at odds with themselves fundamentally from the get-go. So then that makes them a great target and a great consumer of endless supplies of self-help material. So this ties into the other sub point of what I'm going to talk about in this live stream, which is basically red pill and extreme feminist emotional manipulation and mating strategies. So my point is that maybe you realize this, maybe you don't, but it seems to be pretty well verifiable that most men have the willpower and self-control of a small rodent. And they exist almost entirely in service of their pee-pee. Get a girl to touch their pee-pee, or get a guy to touch their pee-pee, or show someone their pee-pee, or look at something on the internet that makes their pee-pee feel good, or play video games that stimulate their pee-pee, or listen to music, or eat too much food, or go to the gym and lift a bunch of weights. Why? Because hopefully someone will touch their pee-pee. I mean, this is I'm sorry to be so simplistic about it, but I think as guys and as mature adults, it's worth taking the courageous steps of being a bit honest and examining our own motivations and our own drivers and what really makes us tick, and perhaps letting go of some of the hypnosis and the wishful thinking and the superstition and all the fantasy and emotionality that tends to confuse us. Which, if what I'm saying is not true, then why are now people so confused? Why are they seeking so much and having to do so much self work and inner journeying and discovery and all these things? If you're not confused, you don't have to do those things. If you're not lost, you don't have to seek. Like, it's not really how it works. Basically, my point is that a lot of people have bought into these ideas that more or less just handicap them for life because it fundamentally goes against how their system actually functions, and it trains them to develop the wrong qualities. Maybe not the wrong qualities, let's say, but it trains them to develop less efficient qualities, less efficient ways of living their life and navigating the world. Which, let's face it, we're humans. We live in the world, and that's a lot more useful than worrying about chakras and past lives and future lives and karma and reincarnation and all these other things. I mean, sure, maybe if your life is completely dialed in, your health is great, and you feel really feel really comfortable and at ease within life and within yourself, then sure, have at it, go for it. But I don't come across a lot of people who fit that bill. So I think maybe there's other questions and more relevant, useful things to particularly look at and explore. So basically, what I'm trying to get at is I've seen so many different trends come up over the years, and I saw something earlier today that just really clarified it. And it's the trend of all of these kind of spiritual bros who are now, "Oh, I'm red pill, I'm masculine, I'm all about boosting my testosterone and being my divine masculine self, and I'm carnivore, and I follow Aubrey Marcus and Paul Saladino, and I'm on TRT, and I drink urine, and I sun gaze, and I follow Andrew Huberman, and I'm a biohacker," doing all these things, right? Which is cool. There's a lot of valid stuff in there, and if it helps people sort their lives out and find meaning and improve their health, great. All more power to them. What I'm more so pointing out is the polarity swings and the yo-yo and the seesaw that has occurred and probably will occur again. Because let's face it, if it's already occurred multiple times, odds are it's probably going to occur multiple times again. What I mean is, women said, "Oh, we're feminists and we have all these gender, political, socio-economic beliefs, and subsequently we think men should be a certain way." And because men, like I said, have the willpower of a small rodent and are basically orienting themselves and their lives around having someone touch their pee-pee, they said, "Oh, okay, we're in our divine masculine and we're in touch with our feelings and we're gonna grow our hair long and we're gonna talk about our feelings and our emotions and maybe we're gonna get naked with other men and touch each other's penises while we look into each other's eyes and soul gaze and we're gonna take plant medicines, we're gonna paint our nails, we're gonna do all these things, which ultimately are just things that girls do typically." So it's men basically trying to behave like women in the hopes that those women will then give them approval and touch their pee-pee or give them some attention or affection. But then now there's a lot of women who went to the other extreme. "Oh, we're anti-feminist. We reject all of these things. We're red pill. We're no longer vegan. Now we're carnivore. We're no longer, polyamorous OnlyFans sexually promiscuous. Now we love God and we've seen the light and we found ourselves and we're saved." And now what do you know? What are men doing? "Oh yeah, we're right wing too, and we're red pill, and now we're conservative, we're carnivore, and we're all about, you know, boosting our testosterone and being these strong men and all these things." Huh. What a coincidence. uh as these groups of women that these guys wanted to court change their preferences, is it a strange coincidence that all these guys subsequently changed their preferences as well? I don't know, maybe it's just a big coincidence and there's no connection whatsoever. But I would say more often than not, that's really where it ends up. And I think a lot of guys that end up in red pill as a pivot, as moving on in that conversation, it's they did that and then they got hurt or it didn't work out or the woman's preferences changed and again they got hurt or they got left or they got screwed over or something or maybe they just married a genuinely horrible person. But the thing is, being a bad person or a good person has really nothing to do with your gender. You can be a man, you can be a woman, you can identify as anything, and you can still be a good person and you can still be a bad person. You can have any color of skin from any ethnicity and any religion and any spiritual orientation and any gender and anything at all, and you can still be a good person and you can still be a bad person. You can still treat people well, you can still treat people poorly, you can still be selfish, self-absorbed, and kind of unpleasant, or you could be kind and nice and pleasant to be around. those traits are inherently human and they have absolutely nothing to do with your gender or what PP you do or don't have or your sexual orientation or your religion or your diet. You're polyamorous, you're monogamous, you do plant medicines, you do chakras, you do all, it doesn't matter. These are fundamental human things. And I think until people realize that, they're just still going to be lost. They're still going to be chasing, I'm vegan, and now I'm carnivore, and then now I'm the next thing, and now I'm the next thing, depending on what trendy influencer tells me to think or do or whatever. Yeah, and none of that is empowering. The only thing that's empowering is basically making those decisions within yourself and separating yourself from all the noise and the nonsense and the coercion and the manipulation and the fantasy, and more or less just stop lying to yourself and actually develop your own conscience as an individual, and then reflect on your own actions and try to treat people in a certain way that's going to be relative to ultimately how you treat yourself and how you choose to move through the world. The solution is not red pill, it's not extreme feminism, it's not misogyny, it's not misandry, it's not taking more TRT, it's not sunning your butthole while chanting Om or whatever other things, other gimmicks and parlor tricks and circus maneuvers that people are doing and are into. Because ultimately, if you're still caught up in that, you're still just orientating yourself around someone or something else that is ultimately transient and ultimately going to change. So if it's all of these kind of angry, bitter, red pill kind of guys or divine masculine sort of guys, you're still ultimately, the vast majority of the time, orienting yourself around females who probably have some type of borderline personality disorder, which is probably not going to go out and be very well. And what I mean by that is, I'm feminist, now I'm anti-feminist. I'm vegan, now I'm paleo, now I'm this, now I'm that, now I'm this, now I'm that. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. That's instability within your personality, which is what borderline personality disorder is. It means your fundamental sense of self is really unstable. So if you have really unstable people orientating themselves around someone else who's very unstable, that's just not gonna pan out very well. You start adding in drugs, I mean, sorry, plant medicines, then it's gonna get even worse. You start adding in all these layers of psychological coercion and emotional manipulation, chakras and astrology and human design, and all this spiritual stuff and self-help and therapy and inner work and social media and therapy, start adding it all in, and you're just taking instability and exponentially increasing it, exponentially fueling that fire. And ultimately, instability fuels instability. And if none of that is true, and if that's not the case, then why are these yo-yo swings happening and these seesaws and flip-flopping and all these types of things? Why are they so prevalent? Why are they so popular? And if you don't know what I'm talking about, just go on social media, any platform, and start looking through these things, and you'll see these people with massive followings, millions and millions and millions of followers. Uh, and why does it work? Sometimes, yes, of course, there is useful, helpful information for sure. Um, if no one ever told you to drink water in the morning, and someone tells you to drink water in the morning, that can be life changing. Doesn't mean that person's gifted or special or anything whatever. It just means they shared some basic information with you, which hopefully the person can then take and then apply and then move on with their life. The problem is, and this is a little bit of pivot, is that we as modern humans do not realize the degree in which we are hypnotized and conditioned like dogs, like animals, because ultimately we are animals. I'm sorry to be so mundane about it, but we are. What I mean is, if you want to be an authority in the public space, I'll give you two great options that you could start today and probably build a massive following. One is you could be, I'm the science guy. I have these credentials and I have these terms behind me, and I speak in this language that people are hypnotized to respond to, like Pavlov's dogs, they ding, 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 and they start salivating. So you can do the science, the religion of science, or you can do the kind of like Jay Shetty route, where like I was a monk, but now I've seen the light and I want to share my spiritual message with the world. If you take either of those things, you can do really well in the public sphere. Why? Because that is what people are hypnotized and conditioned to respond to. Those are the authority figure modes and models that humans, at least in America in modern times, just salivate over. Especially if you're going to take the spiritual sort of route or the new agey route and you're like Jay Shetty and your skin's brown, that will really help. And I can tell you where I live on the West Coast, there's a lot of really terrible teachers, but their skin is not white. So people automatically, because of their unconscious racial bias, which they allegedly don't have because they're modern progressives, they automatically give more validity to what that person's saying. And I have many friends and teachers in the space of many different Eastern arts. And this is the thing that is prevalent within so many people. Their racial bias that they allegedly don't have is projected, and they automatically, subconsciously believe more in the person of some Asian descent, even though what they're saying might be completely, utterly nonsense. Like I can tell you examples of these Asian teachers that I will look at online, and I'll listen to their video, and I'm like, they said absolutely nothing. But because maybe they wore certain clothes and they're Asian, or maybe they talked about it in Chinese, people are like, "This is insane." But it could be as simple as like the Tao is a big concept and most people can't realize it. If you say that in Chinese and you're an Asian person, people are like, "Dude, thank you so much for this. This is just what I needed today. I am so inspired." And it's like the person said nothing. Like if I came on and I said, "Look, God is something that is huge and something we can't understand." People are gonna be like, "You're an asshole. No one likes you. Shut up. Go home." But if I say basically the same thing and I'm Asian or some descent, and I say it in a language with a funny accent, suddenly everyone's like, "Dude, this guy this guy gets it," even though it's nothing. So my point is that people don't realize, especially conscious people, and this is what I'm getting at here, is really the more conscious in all these things that you are, usually the less that you actually are, because the more you start to realize how genuinely conditioned you are, then you like, well, I'm not really going to call myself conscious and give myself all these grandiose labels because I actually see that I'm not. Uh, it's just one of those things. So the more strongly someone has to come on with these labels and this get up and this gallantry and this facade and all the song and dance and parlor tricks, usually that's not the case. And if what I'm saying is not true, then why is it on social media the big thing of like, social media is not real? I'm an influencer, but I'm a real person too. I'm an influencer, but I have bad days sometimes. It's like and millions of people are watching it being like, "Oh my god, this is so refreshing." Why is it refreshing? Because they were caught up in the bamboozlement that that was not actually the case, because they're projecting all of this stuff and this fantasy onto this person, and then the person is really getting off on that fantasy. It's this mutual projection relationship. You project a fantasy onto them, they allow you to project it onto them so you can feel better about yourself, and it's this somewhat symbiotic relationship. But every so often, they come on like, "Look, I'm a person too. I'm a regular person. None of us are perfect." It's like, yeah, no one said that to begin with. We're all human beings. I thought that was implicitly understood, but it isn't when people are so caught up in this projection and fantasy. And my point is just simply that this stuff doesn't serve people, it hasn't served people, and it won't serve people. if their end goal is actually feeling better or improving or growing or transforming or any of the things that they're supposedly subscribing to, it will be beneficial if it's just about validation, profit, um, pornographic gratification, yo-yoing, or validating personality instability. Then yes, it will be very successful and beneficial. But that's not the those aren't the terms and the flags and the slogans that people are subscribing to. Like, if there was millions of people following someone who was like, "Hey, let's all just bask in our, uh, personality instability together," cool, great. It seems like that you could call that integrity because everything is lining up and it's cohesive and it all works together. So to me, that would be fine, but I realize that I'm by most accounts, cynical, mean, harsh, critical, judgmental, and fill in the blank, because I prefer integrity and honesty and transparency, and also just efficacy and efficiency. Meaning, if I want to invest time and energy into something, I would prefer that it actually produce the result that I'm hoping to gain from it. If I'm doing something to feel better and actually change or improve or experience something, I would hope that it would actually do that, not just stimulate my adrenals and my fight or flight system and actually lead me more down the path of dis-ease, which is a lack of ease and a lack of comfort. Because if you're caught up in fight or flight, you're comfortable and you're not at ease. It's pretty simple. And if you want to simplify and distill all the mental, emotional things that people are going through and experiencing, it's really a lack of ease and an absence of comfort, in the simplest of terms. Which again is another idea that I put forth years ago, which was met with with some resistance. And mostly whenever I talk about it, people look at me like I just shat my pants or something. They're like, uh. But anyways, I'm sorry if this is a bit. I know for some people this can be a bit grim or a bit harsh or a bit abrasive or uncomfortable. Um, so I apologize if that is the case. I mean, to me, it's not that way. Um, Obviously, since I'm engaging in the video, it's more so just humorous. And if this is what people want to do, I have no problem with it. They can continue to do that. That doesn't mean I can't have my own opinion and my own view on it. Because again, like I said before, the vast majority of the time, what people are using their spirituality and self help, gender politic amalgamation is for emotional coercion and manipulation. Meaning, oh, I encounter an opinion or a view that I don't like or I don't agree with or makes me uncomfortable. So now I'm going to pull something out of the box. Be like, oh, hold on. That's just your opinion. Hold on. That's just your projection. Hold on. Actually, everything is one and everything is nothing and nothing is everything all at the same time. We're actually just God experiencing itself through a refracted state of consciousness. And so what you're saying is invalid because of that. Or hold on, you're just saying that because you're a cisgendered white man who stands on the privilege of XYZ oppressed people and you never had to work for anything in your life because of the color of your skin and your gender. So what you're saying is invalid. And we could keep going all day with, again, the toolbox of examples of ways in which people avoid anything and everything that approximates something that maybe they don't agree with or makes them slightly uncomfortable. Which is my point, is that the vast majority of the time, what people are doing with this stuff is psychological coercion and emotional manipulation. And if what I'm saying is not true, then why are there books about spiritual bypassing? Why is that even a term? And why is that even a growing trend? Because that's what people are doing the vast majority of the time, unless they are legitimately connected to spirit and they have this blinding white light and halo around them and they're able to manifest and have a whole load of amazing abilities, then I would say, yeah, that person is completely in contact with spirit and they have really attained something. Why would I say that? Well, that's basically the description that from every single tradition and every single religion of people and individuals who happen to have that attainment. So what do we do as modern people? Oh, I felt something tingle in my nervous system, so I'm connected to spirit. Oh, my emotions are spirit. My base desires are spirit. My gardening is spirit. Oh, everything, all these traditions and stuff said throughout all of time and millions of people dedicated their lives to, that's not true because I'm a modern person and my subjective individual experience based on consumerism and based on convoluted hippie ideas that I inherited that I've never investigated or taken to their genesis, yes, I know better. Oh, but I'm an arrogant asshole because I have an opinion, but I'm arrogant, but you're not because you say you know better than all these traditions and you can make your own qigong, yoga, plant medicine, uh, intersectional fusion, spiritual healing thing. That's not arrogant, is it? Oh, okay, yeah. That's just following your purpose, following your calling, following your highest good. Wow. Who knew that just your base desires and stress response was now all of a sudden the highest good? Um, yeah, sure. So my point is, and this is the last thing I'll say, is to to the extent that people are unable to actually have mature adult conversations based in clarity, discernment, honesty, transparency, integrity, is the degree that usually their problems will persist. Because ultimately it's kind of the world we live in. And if we use the mechanics of that we have as humans, the tools that we have that we were given, and try to make the best of them, then it seems like a pretty useful endeavor. But to the extent that we subscribe to all these isms, ideologies, and these projections, and these fantasies, and wishful thinking, and just stay stuck in our emotionality and fantasy, Peter Pan sort of thinking and trend following, is the extent to which problems will just keep accelerating. Um, but again, just my opinion. And again, I'm not aiming or intending to be cynical or mean. I actually feel quite quite comfortable and I don't know if happy is the word, but somewhere there. Um, but if for some reason people conflate having an opinion with, oh, you're a hater, you're a negative person, which again, emotional coercion, psychological or no, psychological coercion, emotional manipulation, which I guess those are kind of synonym, one and the same thing. But that's just my point in my hypothesis for this whole rant, which is the vast majority of the time, this is what people are using these things for. Fundamentally, first and foremost, within themselves, and secondarily, for other people and to navigate the world. How do I know this to be true? How is this to be true? Well, usually people that get into those things are doing it because they feel a sense of a loss of power or control, and they're using these things to try to regain some sense of it. But it's again, it's like eating McDonald's and thinking you're getting a deeply nutritious meal, or eating a genetically modified, just like tomato that basically that you get at the grocery store now, which it's like, is this a tomato? Kind of, it's hard, it's like a baseball, and it's supposed to be a tomato, but then you go to the farmer's market or you grow your own, and you pick it from the vine when it's perfectly ripe, and you're like, "Oh, no, no, this is a tomato." But it's sort of just the trend that our world is going in, where everything's becoming synthetic and, kind of, uh and this is just another manifestation of that. Which I made a video probably a decade ago at this point, and I called it the monocropping of consciousness, which I thought was pretty funny. Because I noticed all these people being up in arms and upset about Monsanto and agricultural practices of monocropping, which is basically the idea of kind of it's a form of homogenation, meaning everything is in this environment is bad and needs to go except for this one plant. So what stood out to me is that I noticed the people that were so up and upset about Monsanto and these practices were doing the same exact thing themselves. They were basically monocropping and homogenizing their entire experience, except labeling this thing as, oh, I have to be positive. I have to be this one small image that I define for myself. I must be that way all the time in all circumstances. And I'm like, maybe that's why you're so mad about all of this stuff and you spend so much time and energy about it, is because ultimately you're doing the same thing to yourself. We have no idea that is what you're doing. So I thought that was actually a good video. I don't know that really did too well or made any impact whatsoever. I thought it was funny. I thought it was entertaining because ultimately, um, I do hope that what I say and the perspectives that I share, which are just my experience, can help and can add some uh, positivity or usefulness to other people's lives. But if there's also a big element that is just ultimately for my own gratification, edification, entertainment, and the benefit of clarifying my own thoughts within my experience and just the the pleasurable act of just speaking. I think people who don't admit that, or maybe because people are like, "Oh, I'm doing this all for the service of others." I'm like, you're getting paid, so I don't think you're doing it for the service of others. It's like, I'm charging $10,000 for this weekend seminar because it's my dharma, and I'm doing it for the service of humankind. It's like, or are you doing it for the fact that it's $10,000 and you're gonna make a lot of money this weekend? I have nothing wrong with making a lot of money and charging whatever you feel is a proportional, value figure for the service or product that you're offering, great. But don't try to act like, "Oh, I'm not doing it for this." Really? Then I bet if you remove the $10,000, I don't know if you would be doing the same thing. Like, it's really easy to come on and be all these things when you have sold your company for 9 figures. It's like, yeah, well, yeah, you don't really have anything else to do. So, and it's also something that really wealthy people tend to do is once they have more money than they really know what to do with, then they focus on legacy, but it's more so about perception, meaning how they'll be remembered and how people will perceive them. Bill Gates is a great example of that. He's someone who was absolutely reviled and hated within the business world for pretty much his entire career. So now that that's all done, he's spending his career trying to be like a good person, and he spends hundreds of millions of dollars a year on a PR firm to create his image. Um, and then, there's like I'll tell you another great example of this. If spiritual people think about like what's the moniker or the image of compassion, it's probably going to be, oh, Dalai Lama, Tibetan Buddhism, and Buddhism. It's all about compassion, loving kindness, and right. That is what people think. So if it's all about those things, then why did the lamas and Tibetan Buddhism rule over Tibet and basically force 90+% of their population into slave labor in servitude? Why did they never build a single road or any type of infrastructure or school or hospitals or anything at all in any way, shape, or form for the populace? While the populace lived in absolute poverty and slave labor like conditions, while the lamas lavished in palaces and accumulated massive wealth. And then why does the Dalai Lama have billions and billions of dollars of wealth and treasure, travel the world on private jets, have a Rolex, exotic watch collection, etc., while the people of Tibet don't? Oh, but it's all about loving kindness and compassion and your fellow human. Really? Then why do they rule for 600 or 800 years and treat people in kind of the worst ways that you can treat people? And then why does basically no one know this? Why do you have all of these people being like, "I love the Dalai Lama. I'm all about compassion in Buddhism." Really? So you're gonna what, enslave your population and make them build you a palace? So you can accumulate treasure and wealth for yourself? Every communist revolution on history that we can tell is all about for the people, returning the power to the people. But then it also, just as a coincidence, seems to coalesce and condense power, wealth, and resources in the select few, while the people starve to death, die, get tortured, etc. Wait, isn't that the same thing that basically every other power structure and system has done throughout history? Isn't that a quinky dink? Isn't that just a bit of a conundrum? But hey, that's just history, right? I mean, no one cares about history when you could just say things that aren't true. Uh, how do I become a bad? Well, I don't know what that means. How do you become a bad what? How do one become a bad? I don't pay 50-50. I pay all got me girls. I don't know what that means. So I'm afraid I cannot answer, and I think you should treat yourself with consideration and respect and honesty. And I think you should have a stable, defined sense of identity, purpose, and meaning within yourself. And then subsequently, you should treat people with decency, respect, manners. Uh, I just thought that would have been the jumping off point. Um, and again, treating people with manners, having somewhat degree of kindness, consideration, politeness, that has nothing to do with your gender, your race, your ethnicity, your religion, your spirituality, none of those things. That's just a human level choice that we can make. And again, obviously, none of us are perfect. The more stressed someone is, the more difficult it is to do those things, obviously. And of course, there are just annoying people in the world. Like, there's no way around that. There are unpleasant circumstances and situations. Sure, you can maybe have some influence upon how you respond, but ultimately, there's just certain basic things of life that are part of being a human and being alive, which I think maybe that's a useful thing for people to think about and examine is what is actually true as a human being? What does it actually mean to be a human being? What do these things actually entail? Because I can tell you this is where a lot of legitimate traditions actually started and where their basis is from. But I think everyone wants to skip all that stuff and just go to like past lives and angels and chakras and plant medicines and TRT and butthole sunning and polyamory and all these other things. Um, so yeah. Anyways, this is longer than I wanted to go, uh, but I appreciate everyone who tuned in, and anyone and everyone who tuned in, and for the comments within the chat. I do again. I know for some people this will seem really off-putting and cynical and mean and harsh and judgmental and whatever. Um, which okay, I mean that's someone's opinion, but I think oftentimes where that comes from is me saying something that makes a person feel less than. So then they assume that I feel that I'm more than or I'm above. So they're thinking that I'm speaking to some dynamic as of like I'm up on the mountaintop and I have seen the light and I am casting down upon you the ultimate truth as delivered upon thee from thine highest source. And it's like, no, dude. uh, I'm wearing a dirty hoodie. My armpits stink because I had just trained for a few hours. Lighting is terrible. I'm on a MacBook. Uh, I'm on like no, not, that's not the context in any way, shape, or form. Um, Person in the chat says, "I have to take seductive class and work out." I don't know what you're saying or what you're on about. I think learning to communicate is a very useful skill. That I think all humans should learn, male, female, and everything in between, whatever you identify with or against. I think communication is very useful. I think being physically fit and healthy and feeling good in your body, I would have thought that would be a given, but apparently not because millions of people follow people online were like, "Hey, exercise." And people were like, "Are you serious? You mean I should exercise?" So yeah, eat decently well, exercise, learn to communicate, um, be interested in something. Because one thing I heard many years ago, it's like interesting people are interested. So if you're someone who has no interests, no curiosities, no creative pursuits, no desires, maybe it could be useful to get some of those, um, just as an enrichment of life to add meaning and purpose and value to your life. I think that's a great useful thing. It's something that's been very beneficial in my own personal, subjective, limited experience, and I think it can help a lot of people out as well. I think ultimately, for to put an icing or put a cherry on top of everything that I've said, I think for a lot of people, unfortunately, a lot of this identity politics, gender politics stuff, that becomes their interest, that becomes their passion, that it becomes their personality in a way, and that's I think, like, that's the least interesting thing, really. If my whole channel was just about me being a man and having a penis, that's that's, I think, the least interesting aspect of my experience as a human. So, to me, that would seem pretty infantile. As an adult being fixated on these things, I mean, if I was a kid and I'm like, "Oh my god, look, I have a pee-pee." Sure, okay, then that's fascinating, interesting, but you have millions of adults still obsessed and fixated on these things. You have a PP? Oh, you have a vagina? Okay, like, we're adults, guys. Can we just move the conversation forward or maybe develop other interests or other passions or other pursuits or maybe other things that are more important to our identity than those superficial things? Because those are not going to be very rewarding because it's ultimately a pretty static thing. Well, it used to be. Now it's turned into a new profit sector, so it's no longer a static thing. But hey, that's progress. But we don't need to go down that rabbit hole. Anyways, thanks again for tuning in. Hopefully, this has been a nice, uplifting, wonderful chat. I'm gonna go watch the season finale of Tokyo Vice, which is a pretty entertaining show. I think if you do watch Tokyo Vice, I think Tozawa, who's the main antagonist, I think he's gonna win. I think the way the story is set up is everyone is coming together against Tozawa, but I think if that goes through, that would be predictable and that would effectively probably end the series. And from a story standpoint, is sort of just predictable and would be the end. But if they're gonna try to keep the show going, then it makes sense that Tozawa maybe is already at the point where his claws are too deeply entrenched within the power system, to where these people can't take him down anymore, and their efforts are just too little, too late. Because I think if they want to keep the story going and continue for another season, that's what they'll have to do. Or the third option, which is something that I can't even really think about, which is some twist or turn that will be even more interesting, that will keep people even more shocked, surprised, and engaged. So yeah, that's what I'm gonna go do. Yeah. In case you were interested, Tokyo Vice season 2, episode 10 is coming up on the projector. So hopefully you found some of this beneficial or useful. If you have questions or comments or want any insight or requests for future live streams, I'll be happy to comply and assist. But otherwise, thanks again for tuning in. I hope you are doing well, and I will talk to you in the next one.